Hello. My name is Alethea Mercer. Yes, that Mercer. And last Christmas, my sister handed me a coupon book for single moms. Right before the radio announced I was the youngest billionaire in the country. 10 seconds before that, I was setting deviled eggs on the table like I still belonged there. They set the table like it was a painting. Every fork aligned. Napkins folded into poinsettia fans. The wine glasses sparkled. If someone walked in off the street, they'd think this was a family that understood love, tradition, wholeness. But I knew better. I knew the tension disguised as civility, the restraint masquerading as manners. I knew the scent of rosemary didn't cover the old patterns, just cloak them in something more palatable. There's a performance to holidays like these. A choreography. You walk the same steps, speak the same lines, smile with your teeth but not your eyes. The trick is to hold your breath long enough not to drown in it. I carried in the deviled eggs, made from scratch because store-bought says you gave up. No one looked up, not even Unia, who used to beg me to bring extra when she was little. She was busy now, scrolling through her phone, her shoulders hunched forward like she was hoping to disappear into the screen. I placed the tray next to the gourmet cheese board Callista had delivered from Manhattan, wrapped in branded ribbon like everything she touched. I caught my reflection in the silver cloche dome. Blurred, tilted, like I didn't belong in the frame. My spot, as always, was the folding chair near the back patio door. Drafty, unpadded, collapsible. Nothing said permanent guest quite like that chair. I poured myself a glass of red. Malbec, probably, but it could have been cranberry juice for all I noticed. My hands were shaking slightly, not from cold, not from nerves, just the echo of all the times I'd walked into rooms like this and remembered I wasn't part of a story. Callista's laugh rose above the hum of conversation. Well, well, she said, lifting her flute of Prosecco. No coupon tonight. Shocking. You might actually starve, huh? A ripple of laughter followed. Polite, effortless, cruel. It wasn't the kind that wounds in the moment. It's the kind that chisels at your foundation. So years later you realize it was never just a joke, it was a blueprint. Vera, my mother, added with a smile too polished to be real, Alethea's always been frugal. Practical girl. I didn't respond. My throat didn't tighten. That would have required surprise. I lifted my glass. The rim was cold against my lips, but I didn't taste anything. I didn't swallow right away. Just let the silence between us settle, like dust, soft but suffocating. They moved on quickly. Talk shifted to Callista's latest podcast episode about minimalist living, ironically, to Unia's solo in the holiday recital, where she sang like an angel and was carried on the shoulders of praise for weeks. To the house my parents were refinancing in Florida. Finally getting some sun, Dad said, as if he hadn't spent most of his adult life in the dark. No one asked about my work. They never did. I'd stopped expecting them to about 3 Christmases ago. That's when I stopped trying to earn a seat and just sat where I was told. The name tag on my plate read Ally. Lowercase, bubbly script, as if softening the letters would make them fit. I folded it in half, tucked it under the charger plate. Out of sight, not out of mind. The food was beautiful, I'll admit. Saffron risotto, balsamic glazed carrots, roasted Cornish hens with sprigs of thyme sticking out like little bayonets. Vera had worked hard, or had her caterer work hard, and it showed. Presentation mattered. Not feeling, not fairness, not presence, but presentation. That was sacred. My father carved the bird like he was in a commercial. Methodical, focused, detached. He didn't look at me once, not even when he passed me a plate. I was the conduit, not the recipient. The motion, not the meaning. Unia hummed something under her breath. I recognized the tune. One of the songs she used to ask me to sing when she couldn't sleep. Funny, now she barely offered eye contact. Then dessert came early because Callista had plans with her in-laws. As if the rest of us didn't have anywhere else to be. Vera clapped her hands and said, "Before everyone rushes off, let's get a picture with the real family." I stood automatically. "Oh no, sweetheart," she said, handing me her phone. "You take it. You have the steadiest hands." So I did. I framed the shot. Callista between Mom and Dad, Uni on her lap, the Christmas tree glowing just right behind them. The portrait of holiday perfection. And I, holding the device, invisible in the reflection of the window. I pressed the shutter button 3 times, each one like a final nail. They didn't ask to see how it turned out. I didn't offer. Later, when the dishes were done and the dishwasher hummed quietly like an afterthought, I sat on the folding chair again. The cushion was still lopsided. My legs had gone numb. I looked down at my hands, still, steady, empty. The living room lights dimmed, leaving just the flicker of the tree. Gold, red, and green reflections danced across the tile floor, indifferent to the ache in my chest. They'd given me nothing this year. Not even the illusion of inclusion. Not even the performance of care. And yet, in that moment, I wasn't angry. I was exact. I had been erased. For a moment, I wasn't even flesh. I was furniture. A chair that didn't match the set. A shadow that didn't follow anyone. A page someone skipped over because it didn't have pictures. I stayed there long after the sounds of laughter had faded into the upstairs hallway. The wine glass empty beside me, the folded name tag still hidden beneath porcelain. I listened to the hum of the fridge, the distant ticking of the grandfather clock, and the faint wind brushing against the patio door. The cold crept in through the gap in the frame. But I didn't move. I wanted to remember this feeling. Because next year I wouldn't be here. Next year, they would set this table again. And something would be missing. Not forgotten. Just gone. The dishwasher's hum faded into the background like a secret being buried. I stood, stretching my legs until they remembered they were mine. The house was still too bright for how late it was. Every lamp glowing, the chandelier dimmed just enough to feel deliberate, not accidental. Callista's laughter drifted from the living room, the kind that came easy to people who had never been humiliated. I carried the last of the dishes into the kitchen. No one offered to help. No one thanked me. That was expected. I moved quietly, carefully, like background noise in a commercial for someone else's life. From the corner of my eye, I saw my mother arranging cookies on a silver tray, each one spaced evenly as if symmetry could pass for love. Callista's voice floated through the hall. "Let's do presents," she chirped, her tone bright enough to fill the room. I got something special for everyone. The family gathered, wine in hand, the room lit by the soft pulse of fairy lights. My folding chair was waiting again, slightly apart from the main circle. When I sat, the metal creaked. Callista handed out gifts wrapped in gold paper, each about perfect, like they'd been tied by professionals. I knew she paid someone to do it. She saved mine for last. The tag was calligraphed. To Ally, for your practical lifestyle. I smiled faintly. My pulse stuttered. I peeled the wrapping paper slowly, aware of everyone's eyes. Inside was a book, one I recognized from the clearance bin at Target. Single Mother Budgeting, Saving Smart for Struggling Women. For a moment, the air went still. Then laughter erupted, first from a cousin, then from my uncle. Someone muttered, "That's thoughtful." Another chuckled, "She really knows your brand." I felt my face cool instead of flush. The heat of humiliation had burned out years ago. What remained was a stillness so sharp it almost felt holy. I closed the book carefully, tracing the crease along its spine. "Thank you," I said. My voice was calm, practiced. "That's useful." Callista tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Well, you always said you liked practical things." I set the book down beside my chair, gently, deliberately. The laughter dissolved into the sound of unwrapping paper and clinking jewelry boxes. Father poured himself another glass of brandy, swirling it like he was testing gravity. "Thinking of expanding the Florida condo," he said, not looking at me. "Callista's name is on the deed now." Someone, an aunt, maybe asked, "What about Alethea?" He didn't hesitate. Wasn't necessary. Less paperwork. Less paperwork. Fewer complications. That was me, an inconvenience efficiently removed. No one said a word after that. The fire crackled politely, as if to fill the space where empathy should have lived. Mother adjusted her bracelet and smiled at Callista. "Show them what we got you." Callista opened a small box, the diamonds catching every flicker of light. Gasps circled the room like applause. I sipped my wine. It had gone cold. The book sat at my feet, its cheap paper cover reflecting the chandelier's glow. I stared at it, unblinking, while the room erupted with small talk about real estate, vacations, Callista's growing list of sponsors. Vera leaned back on the couch, her tone dripping pride. "Our girls are so different," she said. "Callista's our star, always shining. Alethea, well," she hesitated, the pause meant to sound loving but landing like pity. "Alethea keeps us grounded. Grounded. Like a plane that never took off." Someone asked about my job. I said, "It's steady," which was the safest word I could find. No one asked what that meant. Unia climbed into Callista's lap, fingering the bracelet. "Mommy, it sparkles like ice." I smiled at the child, not at the woman holding her. "It does," I said quietly, "but ice melts." No one caught it, or maybe they pretended not to. Later, when the wrapping paper was cleared and the laughter dulled into the sound of digestion, I stood and gathered the glasses. My mother waved a hand. "Leave it, honey. The help will get it in the morning." The help. I froze for half a heartbeat. Then I nodded. "Of course." The book brushed against my ankle as I turned to leave. I bent down, picked it up, and ran my fingers along the spine again. The paper smelled faintly of glue and humiliation. Back in the kitchen, I placed it on the counter beside the tray of uneaten cookies. The title faced up, Saving Smart for Struggling Women. For the first time all night, I laughed, quietly, almost soundless. It startled me, that small sound. It didn't feel bitter. It felt exact. When I looked back toward the living room, I saw my reflection in the mirror above the mantel. Everyone else was framed in the center, laughing, drinking, posing for another photo. I was off to the side, half seen, half light, half something. I didn't step into the frame. I didn't interrupt. I just watched them, the picture-perfect family, unaware that the woman they'd edited out was the only one holding everything together. And as I turned away, I understood. It wasn't a gift. It was a signed declaration. You do not belong. The laughter downstairs faded into the hum of the heater. I slipped away while no one noticed. My footsteps made no sound on the carpeted hallway, only the faint rustle of my dress brushing against my legs. The house smelled of cinnamon and detergent, a mix of comfort and cleansing, as if pretending the past could be washed away. My old bedroom door was half open. I pushed it gently and saw what had become of it. The bed was gone. In its place stood shelves of folded towels, bins of wrapping paper, stacks of out-of-season clothes. The faint mark on the wall, 5'2", age 15, was still there under a thin coat of paint. Not erased, just muted. The lavender scent was so thick it almost choked me. I sat on the small twin mattress wedged between the closet and the boxes. The springs creaked under my weight. The walls pressed in quietly, the way guilt does when it's polite enough not to knock. My fingers traced the rough paint where my name used to hang above the bed. Alethea's room. The sign had been wooden, painted blue. I wondered if it still existed somewhere in a storage bin marked miscellaneous. I pressed my palm against the cool wall, waiting for a pulse that wasn't there. The memory came back easily the night my father called me into his office. His desk smelled of tobacco and pine polish. He didn't ask me to sit. He just handed me a single sheet of paper. "We're consolidating," he said. "Your name complicates the title." His voice had that banker's calm, the kind used to deliver bad news that sounded rational. The main house, the one I'd painted, roofed, and mowed summers through college, was now listed under Callista's name. "She's married," he explained. "It makes sense legally." I wanted to ask why I had to disappear for things to make sense, but the words stopped at the back of my throat. I nodded instead. I'd always nodded. The sheets rustled as I lay back on the mattress. The fabric smelled new. Everything else felt borrowed. My eyes drifted to the boxes above. Christmas decor. Callista's ornaments. Guest linens. None of them said mine. Another memory pulled me under. I was 18, sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of college forms. My mother was folding laundry. The hum of the dryer filled the silence. "Mom," I said carefully, "the scholarship covers tuition, but not room and board." She didn't look up. "You're legally an adult now. You'll manage. You're clever." Clever. Her favorite compliment, the one that meant self-sufficient enough to be ignored. She tucked a towel into a neat square and smiled at her own efficiency. I remember the sound of the dryer door clicking shut, the smell of fabric softener, and the way her words turned the air into something solid I couldn't breathe. I had wanted to cry, but tears would have looked like weakness, and weakness was expensive in that house. I pulled the thin blanket over my legs. The chill from the window crept through the fabric slowly, silently. It felt familiar. Then came the memory I tried hardest to forget. The summer after college, when Callista wanted to open her boutique studio. "It's not a loan," she'd said. "It's a sister thing." I'd given her my savings, every dollar I had from 3 years of contract work, because she promised to pay it back in 6 months. She never did. The store opened with champagne flutes and local news coverage. I wasn't invited. I watched the clip online, Callista smiling beside a banner that read "Built from the ground up." Someone in the background asked if she had help. She laughed. "Nope. Just hard work and faith." The walls of my new storage room bedroom pressed tighter. My chest ached, not from heartbreak, but from the space it left behind. The floor creaked outside. For a second, I thought someone was coming up. I waited. Nothing. Only the house settling around its secrets. I reached for my phone, but there was no signal upstairs. Even the air here refused connection. I lay flat on the mattress, arms crossed over my chest like I was preparing to be embalmed. The hum of the heater below was steady, predictable, almost kind. Above me, one of the boxes tilted slightly. Christmas, Callista's ornaments. I watched it wobble, daring it to fall. It didn't. Of course it didn't. Things that belonged to her never fell. The light from the hallway stretched across the floor, fading slowly, quietly. My breathing matched its rhythm. The thought arrived not as pain, but as proof. I wasn't cut off. I was never connected. I didn't sleep. Not really. The mattress was too thin, the air too still, and my thoughts kept circling like moths around a porch light, drawn to something they couldn't resist but would never understand. My body lay still, but my mind ran laps around every silence in the house. Every creak of the walls, every faint hum from the old radiator felt like a reminder of what I didn't say, of what no one dared to ask. At some point, the darkness began to change. That strange hue of blue, the one you only see when morning is sneaking in before the world has caught on. It's not bright, not quite soft, just in between. Like the moment before a confession, like the moment before a life changes and no one knows it yet. I sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile architecture I had built around me, towers of towels, boxes balanced like truths I wasn't ready to unpack. One box, labeled Callista's ornaments, rested at my side like a silent witness. It hadn't fallen. Of course it hadn't. Things like that never fall when they should. Downstairs, the house was still in post-holiday limbo. The kind of quiet that comes after too much forced joy. There was something about those hours after everyone's supposed to be happy that felt heavier than the celebration itself. Wrapping paper clung to corners like secrets unwilling to be thrown away. A few half-empty wine glasses stood abandoned on the coffee table. Sugar cookie crumbs dotted the rug like someone had tried to leave behind evidence of joy and failed. Unia was already awake, cross-legged on the rug, her iPad glowing in her lap like a private little universe. Her hair was a halo of sleep frizz and innocence, and yet her expression was focused, too focused for a child her age. For a moment, I let myself believe she was just playing a game. Then she looked up. Her eyes widened, as if she'd seen a ghost wearing my skin. "Aunt Ally, is this you?" She turned the iPad around, slowly, like it was something fragile. There it was, my name, Alethea Mercer, next to a headline that made my throat tighten. Billionaire tech founder Alethea Mercer disrupts biotech again. The article was dated 3 months ago. My photo, one I didn't remember posing for, smiled back at me like I was someone else entirely. "It says you're a billionaire," she whispered, as if saying it too loud might make it disappear. Everything froze. Even the morning light stopped moving. I could feel Ruben nearby, still in his recliner, a newspaper in his lap, eyes fixed on the same page he hadn't turned in 15 minutes. He didn't look up, but he didn't leave either. I knelt beside Unia, gently taking the iPad from her hands. The screen felt warm, too real, too close. My fingers hovered above the power button like I was deciding whether to delete a piece of myself. "It's nothing," I said, trying to smile. Her brow furrowed. "But it says." "I know what it says," I snapped, sharper than I intended. She flinched, and shame hit me instantly. "I mean, the internet doesn't always explain things the right way." Unia paused, thinking. "So it's not true." I hesitated. "It's complicated." That was the first honest thing I'd said all morning. She nodded slowly. "I won't tell anyone." My throat tightened. "Thank you." She smiled and went back to her game, or maybe pretending to. But I saw her glance at me out of the corner of her eye. Not with judgment, not even curiosity, just wonder. I stood up, unsure where to go. The kitchen felt like a safe enough exile. Ruben was there. He didn't look up as I walked in. He was washing a dish, a single plate, scrubbing it over and over like he was trying to erase something only he could see. The sink was already clean. He had no reason to be doing this, except maybe he needed a reason not to say what was really on his mind. "You always liked machines," he said quietly. I blinked. "What?" "You know, since you were little, taking apart radios. That old toaster. You rewired the thermostat when you were 10 because it was 2 degrees off." He let out a low chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "We thought you were trying to blow the place up." I smiled despite myself. "I remember." He rinsed the plate again. Still the same one. Still scrubbing. "We figured you'd do something with it. Maybe build gadgets. Fix satellites." "You figured." He nodded slowly. "Callista thought you'd become a teacher. Vera thought you'd marry rich. And you." He finally looked at me. His eyes were tired, but not angry. Not cold. Just old. "I thought you'd surprise us. I just didn't know how much." I waited. For more. For anything. But he dried the plate and reached for another that didn't need cleaning. "You never asked," I said softly. His hands froze. Just for a second. "I didn't think you wanted me to." Maybe I didn't. Maybe I had needed him to ask anyway. But I didn't say that. Instead, I folded a dish towel with mechanical precision. Folded once. Aligned. Pressed. Again. And again. Until it looked like something ready to be shipped off and forgotten. From the living room, Vera's voice rang out, too loud for the silence we'd built. Ally, be a dear and help Callista wrap the biscotti tray for the Whitmans. My hand stopped moving. Reuben didn't say anything. Didn't stop me. Didn't even look. The towel in my hand felt like a surrender flag. I turned, walked back into the dining room. Callista stood over a silver tray, humming softly, her fingers busy arranging ribbons like it was an art installation. She didn't acknowledge me, didn't even look up. She just slid a roll of cellophane across the table toward me. I took it. Of course I did. As I passed Unia again, she looked up and mouthed, "Was it you?" I didn't answer, but I smiled, just a little. And somehow, I think that was enough for her. Callista's laugh drifted like smoke, light, curling, and impossible to ignore. It lingered in the air even after she stopped, as if the house itself wanted to remember her sound. She leaned back in her chair, legs crossed in her signature, effortless posture. One arm draped along the backrest, her glass of wine balanced lazily between two fingers. She looked like she belonged. She always had. Maybe she did. Maybe I'd only ever been a seasonal visitor here. Someone remembered when convenient and erased when necessary. The prodigal daughter minus the return party. We were all at the dining table again, as if it hadn't fractured years ago under the weight of unspoken truths. The main course had been cleared. Now came dessert, half-eaten slices of pie melting into their plates. Coffee cups scattered like witnesses, warm and buzzing, but no one really sipping. Callista tapped her spoon against the rim of her mug, a quiet, rhythmic tick. Deliberate, designed to draw attention without asking for it. "I was just telling Sarah about Chris's big app idea," she said. Her voice laced with sugar, but her smile sharp enough to cut. "Remember? Save the world with code. Lasted, 6 months?" Laughter circled the table. Polite, safe, familiar. My mother chuckled lightly and said, "But she bounced back. She always finds a way." My fork hovered midair. I hadn't eaten much, but the muscle memory kept me performing. Chew, sip, smile, be small. Callista was telling my story again, her curated version. She made it sound like an anecdote, a quirky failure worth chuckling over. A harmless family moment, but it wasn't harmless. It was a theft, a quiet, regular theft. And she never told us what she ended up doing. Callista went on, swirling her wine like a wand. "But I'm sure it's something steady. Right, Ally?" She said my name like a dare. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I set my fork down with care, the prongs pointing forward like a line I was drawing. Vera, my mother's cousin, self-declared advisor on all things life choices, jumped in. "I heard she's working at some tech place," she said brightly. "That's why I sent her resume to Monica's office. Just to help. A stable job with benefits never hurt anyone." It wasn't the words. It was the way she said help. Like I was drowning and too proud to ask for the lifeboat. The air changed. Not a gasp, not a sound, but a collective lean, a subtle tilt of attention. Vera added she needed stability. Poor thing, always chasing big dreams. I folded my napkin. Carefully, square edges, a quiet rebellion. I looked up and let my gaze settle on my mother. She gave me that look, the one that said just let it go. I turned my attention to Callista, whose eyebrows arched in amused expectation. "You're building a podcast, Callista," I said, my voice flat but clear. I built a firewall. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, it was surgical. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. "A firewall," I repeated. "It saved 12 hospitals from ransomware attacks last quarter. That's what I've been doing." There was a clink, a spoon against porcelain. A cough, half swallowed. "I guess we missed that update," Callista said. Her voice carried its usual syrupy charm, but it cracked around the edges. "You weren't listening," I answered. Vera shifted in her chair. We just worry, honey. You've always been so private. We try to fill in the gaps. I tilted my head, not smiling. You filled in the gaps with your stories. That's not concern. That's control. The room stopped pretending. No one reached for more pie. No one asked for more coffee. Callista opened her mouth, ready with another zinger, some deflection wrapped in humor, but I stood before she could deliver it. I gathered my plate, still mostly untouched. No dramatics. No outburst. Just stillness and decision. As I turned to leave, I paused. Some things don't need defending, I said without raising my voice. They defend themselves. No one stopped me. No one followed. And that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. I walked down the hallway in silence, my feet brushing across the hardwood like I was tiptoeing out of someone else's life. The walls, lined with photos that excluded me, stared back like jury members who already had their verdict. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't text anyone later to explain myself. There was a time I would have eaten the pie, laughed at the story, and stayed late just to prove I could survive them. But not tonight. Tonight, I didn't swallow down silence to keep the peace. I let the silence stay and made it mine. I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. But I was watching now. Watching how narratives get built, how truths get edited, how stories get stolen and reshaped until the person they're about doesn't recognize themselves. I used to think being quiet was safe. Now I know it's just another way to disappear. But I'm not disappearing anymore. I'm observing. I'm remembering. I'm documenting the moments when people show you who they are and who they think you are. And I'm not hungry for their validation anymore. The table behind me, the one where I used to eat and shrink and nod, isn't mine. It never was. Dessert had just been served. The smell of caramel and espresso drifted between the conversations that never meant anything. My plate sat in front of me untouched, a piece of pie collapsing under its own weight. I decided to stop eating earlier. Now I wasn't sure why I'd stayed. Maybe habit. Maybe to witness whatever came next. Someone, maybe my uncle, fiddled with the old kitchen radio sitting on the counter. It was something he did every holiday, like clockwork. Can't have Christmas without some music, he said. The dial hissed, static cracking, then the faint hum of a jazz station. People went back to their small talk, the background laughter, the pretending. Then it happened. A man's voice, crisp, confident, filled the room. And this year's list of America's youngest billionaires includes Alethea Mercer, 34, founder and CEO of Cytoshield Technologies. The air stilled. The forks froze midair. A wine glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the tile. The sound was clean, final. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came out. My father's head turned slightly, the newspaper still folded in his hand. Callista blinked at me like she'd seen a ghost wearing her reflection. I reached for my glass. My fingers didn't shake. I took a slow sip. The wine tasted sharp, metallic. The sound of the radio announcer continued, words spilling into the silence. Cytoshield's software has been credited with preventing multiple cyber attacks across major hospital systems. Mercer is known for her reclusive leadership style, rarely appearing in public. My name echoed again. The syllables sounded foreign, too formal to belong to this house. Finally, Callista found her voice. What is that? Is that some kind of joke? Her laugh was thin. It broke in the middle. I looked at her, then at the shattered glass on the floor. No joke, I said quietly. Vera spoke next, clutching her napkin as if it were a lifeline. Why didn't you tell us, dear? We could have celebrated properly. We could have. I cut her off gently. You never asked. Her mouth opened, then closed. Callista's face was drained of color. So this is why you've been so quiet all these years, she said. You were hiding. From us. Hiding. I repeated, almost amused. No. I was surviving. Nobody moved. Even the radio seemed to hold its breath again, waiting. I leaned down and reached for the book still lying beside my chair, the one she'd given me last night. Single Mother Budgeting, Saving Smart for Struggling Women. I held it up, letting the cheap, glossy cover catch the light. This was supposed to be funny, I said. Right. Callista shifted in her seat. It was a joke. It was cruel, I replied. But don't worry. I kept it, as a reminder of what people think when they only see the outside. I set the book down again, gently, like placing evidence in front of a jury. The only sound was the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Vera finally exhaled. Well, this is unexpected, she said, forcing a smile. We just didn't know. We thought you were struggling. You never asked for help. I met her eyes, because every time I did, it came with a price tag. Her smile faltered. Callista looked away, pretending to smooth the tablecloth. You always had a way of making things dramatic, she said softly. Even now. I almost laughed. The irony of her calling me dramatic while she sat trembling under the weight of her own illusion was almost beautiful. The silence you gave me, I said, my voice even. I made it my fortress. I stood, gathered my glass, and started toward the doorway. Where are you going? My mother called after me. Home, I said. Wherever that is. I paused in the doorway. The air in the room felt heavy, but not on me. On them. I turned my head slightly, catching their reflections in the dining room mirror. My father, motionless. My mother, confused. My sister, shrinking into the chair that used to feel like a throne. For years, I had wanted this moment, recognition, justice, something to balance the scale. But standing there, I realized I didn't need it. The truth had spoken without me lifting a finger. I left them there, suspended in their disbelief. Behind me, the radio crackled again, switching to another story. In other news, the announcer's voice faded as I stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet now, except for the sound of my footsteps and the wind pressing against the windows. At the front door, I slipped on my coat. My reflection caught in the glass pane, steady, calm, real. They had built their empire of judgment on my silence. Now it was their turn to live inside it. The wind hadn't stopped since morning. It scraped against the windows like it wanted in, howling low and constant, a voice too ancient for language, but desperate to be heard. My apartment, dimly lit and still, smelled of cardamom and the faint musk of old paper. I had left the same mug of tea on the coffee table for hours. The steam was long gone, the surface filmed over. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't touched much of anything since I returned. This was my sanctuary now, a place carved from silence and boundaries. No mirrors, no photographs, no trace of them. So when the knock came, measured, polite, rehearsed, I didn't answer. Not immediately. I froze in the center of the room, my breath pausing mid-inhale. It was a knock too soft to be urgent, too firm to be friendly. 2 taps, then silence. Then again, like someone who had learned just how long to wait before becoming insistent. When I opened the door, she stood there. Callista, a name that used to feel like gold leaf, beautiful, delicate, expensive. Now it felt like rust under my tongue. She wore an ankle-length camel coat, the collar folded high, like a soft shield. Snowflakes clung to her sleeves like little witnesses, refusing to melt. In her hands, a tray of macarons, pastel perfection in a box too glossy to be casual. I figured we should talk, she said, woman to woman. Her voice was lacquered in civility, her smile professional, neutral. It was the smile of someone who'd practiced empathy in front of a mirror. I just stared. Then I stepped aside, more out of instinct than decision. Not an invitation, a curiosity. She walked in like she'd been here before, even though she hadn't. Her eyes scanned the room with the cool efficiency of a critic, noting the absence of clutter, the muted walls, the stack of unread books beside the armchair. "Nice place," she offered. "Minimal. Quiet." I didn't answer. I closed the door slowly, deliberately. The lock clicked like punctuation. Callista sat. Not asked. Not prompted. She crossed her legs, rested her hands in her lap. She looked like she was here for an interview. Or a deposition. "I've been thinking a lot," she began. "About us. About everything. And I realized something." Here it came. "We've always had different kinds of power. You with your mind, your tech, your instincts. Me with my presence, my voice, my face. We complement each other." She smiled again, a little wider now. "If we work together, imagine the reach. A platform, a foundation, maybe a documentary even. Redemption sells, you know. Especially when it's got a strong female lead." I stayed standing, arms crossed. I didn't want her comfort contaminating my furniture. She went on. "We could reclaim the family name. Shape the narrative. You have the data, I have the influence. We'd be unstoppable." She paused, waiting for a flicker of agreement. I gave her nothing. Instead, I walked to the bookshelf, pulled down my laptop and flipped it open. The screen glowed in the half-dark, a soft blue light that made her squint. The homepage of the Mercer Foundation loaded. For women who succeeded despite their families. I turned the screen so she could see. Her expression didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. She clicked her tongue once, barely audible. "So," she said slowly, "this is your way of cutting us out." I met her gaze. "You were never in." Her mouth twitched. "Don't be dramatic, ally. I'm offering you an olive branch." "No," I said, closing the laptop with a soft snap. "You're offering a ladder, because the ground under you is cracking." Silence. She blinked. Twice. Then leaned back slightly, the tray of untouched macarons between us like a failed bribe. "I get it," she said. "You're hurt. You think we shut you out." "I don't think it," I said. "I lived it." The words sat in the air like stones. Neither of us moved. The wind pressed harder against the windows. The snow outside blurred the city into watercolor. Inside, the tension between us sharpened. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a case study. "You know, I always envied how calm you seemed. How untouchable." I didn't blink. It wasn't calm. It was survival. Her face shifted, just a fracture. The makeup didn't quite hide the fatigue beneath her eyes. She stood then, slowly, brushing invisible lint from her sleeve. She picked up the tray, but didn't leave yet. "I hope you won't hold on to this bitterness," she said. "It's not healthy." I gave her a smile. Small, unapologetic. "This isn't bitterness," I said. "It's clarity." Callista hesitated, just for a heartbeat. "Well, Merry Christmas, I guess." "Take care, Callista." I didn't watch her leave. The door closed behind her with a quiet finality. No slam. No parting words thrown like knives. Just a gentle click of the latch sealing the air. I stood in that silence, the kind that only comes after a storm no one else hears. I walked back to the laptop, logged into the back end of the Mercer Foundation, scrolled past the homepage, past the mission statement, past the launch video, the testimonials, the media mentions. I clicked board members. No Callista. No Vera. No hollow names in golden frames. Just women who had clawed their way out of stories written by others. Women who'd chosen themselves. This wasn't revenge. This was release. The apartment had gone quiet again. Not a peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that comes after laughter or music or love. This was the kind of silence that followed performance. A silence so sharp it could slice the air. The tray of untouched macarons sat on the counter, delicate and overpriced, like a joke with no punchline. Lavender, rose, pistachio, each one picked to impress, not to enjoy. She had brought them like peace offerings, or bribes. She always confused the two. I stood still for a long time, rooted to the floor like the truth. The scent of her perfume still lingered, stubborn and excessive, expensive and tragic. That scent had always announced her before she even entered a room. Callista Hensley, PR empress of polished lies. She never said hello. She said arrival. Now there was only space. Not relief. Not closure. Just space. I breathed it in. She had left without storm or spectacle. A rare choice for her. But even Callista knew when a stage had collapsed beneath her heels. 3 weeks passed. Then the headlines came. It started with the drop of a podcast episode. Something sleek and saccharine. Something scripted. Her voice poured through the speakers like syrup. Slow, sweet, calculated. The episode was called My Sister, the Genius, Lessons from a Family of Titans. Her smile was everywhere. On thumbnails, on sponsored Instagram reels, even in Times Square on a digital billboard for a brief, humiliating hour. That curated red lip, that dewy lighting, that signature tilt of the chin like royalty blessing the masses. She was always brilliant, she said, her tone that familiar blend of reverence and ownership. Quiet, sure, but driven. I always knew she'd do something important. I helped raise her in a way. I blinked, laughed once. The sound felt foreign in my throat. Every word was a rewriting, every pause a performance. Her cadence was surgically smooth, as if she had practiced it in the mirror while applying her makeup. She built her narrative like she built her brand, beautiful, strategic, and entirely dishonest. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. By day 3, the unraveling began. A freelance journalist on Twitter, one of those sharp-eyed, unpaid truth-tellers, posted a thread. Callista's timeline doesn't add up, it began. A quiet bomb. Screenshots followed. Archived LinkedIn updates, deleted tweets, inconsistencies in her help raising me claims. A tech blogger picked it up next, dissecting the gaps between her words and the actual public record. Then came the screenshots. A former intern, likely underpaid and deeply underestimated, posted emails from years back. Internal correspondence. Her words, not mine. In one, she had referred to me as emotionally stunted and dead weight. The thread went viral. Overnight, deadweight genius trended on X. Sponsors panicked. A French skincare company dropped her. A coffee brand quietly removed her face from their holiday campaign. Even her long-standing PR firm, the one she co-founded, posted a cryptic, "We value integrity," statement and quietly scrubbed her from the leadership page. The podcast episode was pulled, but the internet is a mirror with infinite reflections. Once something appears in it, it never truly disappears. The final blow came with a headline on a major business outlet. PR queen fabricates ties to billionaire sister, the fall of Callista Hensley. There it was, my name, used again. But this time, not as a pedestal. This time, it was a weight she couldn't lift. She issued a statement, an elegantly written non-apology. "I only wanted to celebrate my sister's brilliance," it said. "Sometimes, love comes out messy." Love. That wasn't love. That was marketing. My phone buzzed incessantly. "Did you see this? Your sister's name is toast." OMG. "You okay?" I let them pile up. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I sat at my desk with a thick folder in front of me, a grant proposal from a robotics engineer named Isabella Morales, a first-generation college student from El Paso. Her ideas were raw, risky, and full of fire. She reminded me of who I used to be before I learned that silence was safer than brilliance in a house full of mirrors. I smiled, just slightly. This was the work that mattered. Let them write their think pieces. Let the empire of illusions collapse under its own weight. I had my own architecture now, one made of algorithms, ethics, and hard-won clarity. A year passed, and like it always does, Christmas returned. I didn't go home. I wasn't invited. There was no confrontation, no screaming match, no cold call at midnight. Just absence, the kind that doesn't need explanation, the kind that hangs in the air like snow, quiet, final, and oddly beautiful. A cousin texted me days later. They set a plate for you. I didn't reply. I imagined the table, Vera's obsessive folding of the napkins into swans, the ceramic turkey platter, the silverware passed down through generations of people who never learned to say, "I'm sorry," without also saying "but," and one seat empty, not forgotten, just unfillable. I wondered if they said my name, if they pretended to miss me, if anyone had the courage to admit the silence wasn't my punishment, it was my decision. Then came the detail that stayed with me. Unia, the only one I missed without bitterness, had asked the question, "Is Aunt Chris coming this year?" Vera, ever the performer, dabbed at her eyes and blamed the pine allergies. That old trick, as if emotion was a virus, and tears had to be justified by biology. But even Unia, in her tender innocence, must have felt the shift in the room, the way adults avoid the truth like stepping around glass. Everyone knew the difference between pollen and shame. And me, I was miles away, in a sunlit apartment, the scent of peppermint tea in the air, a record playing softly in the background. No forced laughter, no brittle forgiveness, no need to shrink myself to fit a chair at a table that never truly had room for me. They could set the plate, light the candle, whisper my name like a wish or a curse, but I wouldn't be there. Not ever again. I didn't burn the bridge. I just never walked back. The first snow of the new year came quietly. It dusted the streets outside my apartment like powdered sugar, softening even the sharp edges of the city. I stood by the window with my coffee, watching the flakes gather on the sill. They didn't rush. They didn't announce themselves. They just landed, deliberate, unbothered. That's how he knocked. Not loud, not insistent, just present. I opened the door, and there he was, my father, Reuben Mercer. Hat in hand, coat soaked through, cheeks pink from cold. He didn't speak right away, just looked at me like he had something rehearsed and suddenly forgot every word. We stood there, both on opposite sides of something too old to name. Then he said it. "We needed you to be small, so we could feel big." I let the words settle. He didn't flinch when he said them. That made them heavier. Not cruel, just true. Truth doesn't need to shout to crush you. I nodded once. "You did." He waited. Maybe for permission. Maybe for rescue. I didn't move. I didn't open the door wider. But I didn't close it either. He lowered his eyes. That's all I came to say. I watched him walk away, coat heavy with snow, shoulders curved in a way I'd never noticed before. Not defeated, just aware. The next time I saw him was in memory. 2 weeks earlier, I had stopped by the Mercer kitchen. Not because I missed it, but because I owed one person inside a goodbye. Rowena. She was slicing shortbread on a blue plate with little cracks in the glaze. She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile people give you when they see your truth before you speak it. "You don't have to explain anything," she said. "I saw you long before the radio did." She placed a cookie tin in my hands, wrapped in twine. No ribbon, no card, just kindness. I didn't cry, but something inside me softened, like old glass warming in sunlight. That moment didn't fix anything, but it reminded me I wasn't invisible to everyone. Now, standing in my nonprofit's new coding lab, I saw that same softness reflected back in the eyes of a girl no older than 12. She raised her hand, timidly during a workshop, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Mercer, do you know what it feels like to be the only girl in the room?" I smiled, not out of pride, but memory. "Every room I ever walked into," I said. The girl nodded, like I'd just handed her armor. She went back to coding, and I stood there, grounded in the weight of everything that had brought me here. Later that evening, I returned home. The apartment was quiet in a way I had grown to respect. I hung my coat and walked to the cabinet above the coffee maker. The coupon book was still there. Still glossy. Still absurd. I didn't throw it away. I opened the cabinet beside it, where I kept a framed photo of my team, women from all over the country who had built something powerful from the parts of themselves no one else saw. I placed the book beside the frame, not as a keepsake, as a reminder that healing doesn't always mean erasing the scars. Sometimes it just means giving them a shelf where they can sit quietly and not define the room. Sometimes the hardest doors to close are the ones we've already walked past. What do you do when family becomes the weight instead of the foundation? Have you ever outgrown the place they swore you'd never leave? If this story found something in you, anger, truth, relief, hit subscribe. There are more stories coming, and maybe one of them is yours.